Okay, so yeah, I was introducing Lemonot, who are there in the little bottom right of my screen. Lorenzo, Perri, and Sabrina Morreale, they're good friends of ours. We were all teaching in Bangkok at some point, and we thought it would be very interesting to invite them today, specifically to interject and to inspire us with their work in the workshop that we're running right now. I say this because they are very interested in their work in acts of translation, I would say. So they always look at aspects that are decorative or symbolic or folkloristic, and then they work a lot with manipulating those references. So, but they will explain it much better, and we will see some of their projects. Yeah, I think they're at the moment they are in Italy, but they're usually based in London. They have graduated from the Architectural Association, and they've been teaching in Bangkok with us for a couple of years. It was great fun, I have to say, and we've always been in touch since then. We've been also working on a couple of projects together. Also, I think it's important to note that they're Italians like myself, and like all Italians, they love food. So I think this is also quite to the point of the midnight snack. And I think they have made a selection of a few recent projects that particularly deal with the food, the act of making of food, selling of food, consumption of food as an aesthetic act. So I just give them the stage. And if you guys want to present your screen, go ahead.
Okay, let us.
We selected 4, not 5,
okay,
but if we don't have time, just let us know.
Screen. Let's see if we manage.
Yeah, I think it's interesting if you just show us your work, and then freely everyone can, interrupt and ask questions and comment.
It's loading. Can you see our screen now?
Yes.
Okay. That's great. So just like, few words as John introduced us very well. I would say, like, when we try to present ourselves, we always say that we try to use architecture and performative arts as tools, let's say, to detect, celebrate, and trigger the spontaneous theater of everyday life. And in that sense, we feel that food is one of the privileged medium that allows us to do this. So in combination with food, in combination with architecture, and like the way people interact with these two things. So today, the idea is showing you like different projects that deal with food, people, and architecture. And all these projects, they led to very different outcomes. We're gonna show you the very first projects we did together and the very last projects that we did together. The last one was finished actually 3 days ago, and John was with us at the beginning of this last project. So, this first one that is called Edible Archetypes, that was like the attempt of understanding what does it mean to create a project as a recipe, to conceive a project as a recipe. And we were collaborating with the pastry chef, and we were creating a family, a series of dome-like cakes, and we were trying to understand how to shape them both in patisserie and in the prototyping lab. I'm gonna play a video. Let us know if the video plays smoothly.
Yeah, here what we tried to achieve was actually to translate also the drawings that we were making with the computer of the same cake or the same dome in parallelism with how the pastry chef was making those. So it was a constant going forth and back between models and the cooking room. Smashing pieces, trying to create the textures the same as the nuts, perhaps, or it was like looking at the time of how much materials, no, sorry, how many ingredients could hold, for example, the panettone here. It was more about finding the way to relate how architects and pastry chefs were working together.
I mean, in this, for example, was super interesting to understand how you actually take structural decision in patisserie, in the pastry laboratory, and how you use like materials that melt similarly to certain things that you use in the prototyping lab to connect things. In fact, I think it's important to state that in a way, it was a process of translation, but a simultaneous translation. Yes. It's not that we were conceiving blueprints in order to dictate how the cake should have been made, but we were trying to have ideas together with this pastry chef, and then we were trying to develop the ideas and the drawings as a model or as an edible piece. And yeah, in fact, for example, it's interesting to see how certain things, like this one was a completely artificial one. It was made out of terrazzo
tiles
and resin, but at some point, especially if you looked at it from real, it looked edible, like you would have eaten it. Or how, like...
And this was actually real instead here. These were kermes mini balls.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, but in here it was super nice how they came up with this very thin sesame vault, and it was kind of impossible, of course, to produce that finishing in the laboratory. But like, yeah, in here really we were interested in that sense in a sort of methodological parallelism in between two different disciplines that at the end of the day maybe are not that different, especially when it comes to making, when it comes to materiality.
And this needed to last just for like 2 hours to show as a final product. So it wasn't like something that we thought to stay forever. It was more like a very quick, it was 1 week project. Instead,
I mean, as we were saying at the beginning, like we are really interested in the way, for example, food can connect people and spaces, or how people can connect food and spaces, like this kind of interplay. This one, in fact, it's called Anthropotypes, and it's a project that we were doing in London with students, and it was very much about people, no? It was like a sort of, we were trying to personify, let's say, 2 very British markets, Smithfield Market, which is the meat market in London, and Billingsgate Market, the fish market, and we were transforming them into characters, and then we were transforming them. We were imagining, let's say, characters that would have populated those markets, that would have been the translation of those markets, and then the idea was like filming them back in context. I feel like that maybe we can give them a glimpse of the video also with the soundtrack for a bit.
Okay, yeah. These were all like jelly meat replicas that the students were working on for the 2 weeks.
What was nice about the project is that like we had a very international group of students, while those markets are populated by very, very British people. And especially, yeah, the first time we went in there, they were super suspicious towards us, because like they really didn't understand why we were taking so many pictures, asking so many questions, what the hell we were doing in there. Like, it was like somehow there was a sort of also cultural clash and disconnection. The students felt scared. And what instead was super interesting is that when we came back with the masks, like the masks really worked as enabling devices. They helped us to establish a sort of common ground in between us as a group of architects, students, artists, and them. They suddenly were very interested in the project. In fact, the plan at first was really just taking some pictures in the market, but we ended up shooting a video with a lot of unexpected scenes, because as you might see in a bit, like the people were having fun with us, but were having fun with the things. Like,
and all these characters, these masks were constructed by found objects, recycling pieces, metal scrap pieces. Most of them started more as a catalog of like colors, textures, materials, and then it became a headpiece at the beginning. And then it just went all on the body, on the shoulders. But we weren't planning to do a video. We were planning just to have a set of pictures in the space. Here, maybe we're skipping also to to the Billingsgate market. 2 masks were for the meat market and 2 other masks were set in the fish market.
Maybe let's just finish this, yes. It's like a couple of minutes and then we can comment.
I'm always thinking that what is missing from this project is a bit of the smell, a bit more of like the actual idea of coming up with a video as a final outcome. Worked for some bits, but didn't work for others. For example, these pieces that they wear should have been a bit more, I think, alive.
Well, it's also hard to convey through the video certain things that characterize food, like the smell, as you were saying, or the activity.
No, I think it would be amazing if it was a theater play in the market.
Yeah,
and those were the characters. Yeah.
So partly it was because like we were doing a sort of theatrical piece in school at the Architectural Association. But yeah, it would have been nice to invite the guests and the jury in the market.
In the market.
No, it's coming back. Huh? Everything actually started also from this piece, the one that you see in the screen now, that was really there and it really looked like an art installation. So you have like this metallic case where the eels are stored alive and they are stored in those drawers because like they want to somehow reproduce the darkness of the caves. And then you have like the guy that, manages the store, that for us it was like a priest. Because like in a way, it has to sell like those fishes that are still alive in those cases, but they are about to be cooked or to be sold. So in that kind of symbolism really gave us the idea of crafting these characters. So over like, for example, this one that was called the High Priest of Billingsgate. Like, and it's why we also envision this sort of ritual. Also maybe the story of her, like, it was super interesting. How in a way it was like she was having fun, in like enjoying her role and in understanding like she somehow this felt almost like as a fashion show in the market. No, how really the kind of mask was the mask
pushing her boundaries to just perform even more.
She was really shy at the beginning, and then like she really enjoyed the playfulness and the performativity of the act. Somehow, how really the mask was again an enabling device, both for us, both for the students, and for the sellers, for them.
And always in the market, not really in the market, but the one in Bangkok, maybe we can link to it, to the street food funeral was a project that we did in Bangkok with the students for 2 weeks. And we were trying to trace the history of street food and what was happening as well. It was the sort of disappearance of street food sellers, and the government wanting to push them in big shopping malls. And therefore, we started from a sort of procession, and all the students joined in these drawings. So it was how the food was conceived near the temples, how the city of Bangkok was changing. It was a piece of identity for Bangkok to have all these flavors and sellers cooking special dishes and very specific recipes. So what we translated these drawings at the end was
you want to see the video?
Yes, maybe the video. And we grasp every moment from the everyday life. And here was in Chinatown. Bangkok has almost every corner 10 street food sellers every time. We were dividing the city into a grid, basically analyzing 5 different typologies of street food sellers. It was the sweet one. There were the guys doing just the drinks, selling the pork or the squids.
I mean, the idea was like, again, like we wanted to depict like different moments belonging to the food realm of the city into a mural. So if like the first project we show you was really an object, like in here,
yes.
Like this was like the attempt of creating something physical, but like on one hand it could be inhabited by the people. And so, for example, you can see this mural actually with the mirrors behind it, so that people could have seen their image reflected in it, and so they could have interacted in that. And the final outcome was a sort of exhibition where we didn't only like show this thing, but it was paired with the video that Sabrina was explaining you before. And so it was like really this idea of giving a portrait of the current food scene in the city and of the current issues related to them. So the fact that the authorities at some point wanted these street food sellers to disappear.
But the idea to have it on the wall, it was for me also, not sure for you, but like for me it was the idea of memory, like the kind of things that they are erasing, and instead it's gonna be stuck on this wall forever. It's just that part of the stickers, you can peel them off. So it's almost up to you as well, which piece you want to remember. And
also like which piece you want to remove in order to see yourself in it. How you want to identify yourself in the narrative and in the things that the drawing, that the mural is trying to portray. Okay, so these 3 projects were really early ones, at least like in relationship to our practice. So they were done in early 2018 or late 2017. So the first one is really the first project we did together. While now we would like to show you a series of projects that we did at the very, very last. So this one, and I feel like this is one of the most representative project of what we were trying to do, or our idea in relationship to architecture, food, to consumption, production of food and people. This is a pavilion that we were supposed to build in March, and we are gonna hopefully build in March 2021 for a festival in Mexico City, which is called Mextropoli, in the Alameda Central, which is this square in the very city center. And like, as like it happens in a lot of festival right now, temporariness is one of the key concepts. So since like this pavilion in a way needs to stay up for only 3 days, they were putting in the competition brief a lot of emphasis on the dismantling. How are you going to dismantle this thing? Which are the traces? So the idea was actually doing a chili dryer. So a sort of infrastructure where chilies could have been hung, and the last day people in a sort of collective performance could have harvested the architecture. So they will take a chili back home.
Instead of showing this, I think we should show them the reference where we started.
Yeah, these projects that we're going to show you now, they are not published yet or placed in the website because they are about to come. So we're going to show you our folders.
And maybe here is that. So here is when we started to understand we wanted to shift the scale to try to say, okay, let's try to actually construct with food, not for food, or
how to treat food as an architectural material,
and how to make it really structurally almost interesting for us. And here we started looking at the ristras, the chili-rich ristras, usually dried on top of the houses in New Mexico. Also in Mexico City, you're gonna find a lot of them in the markets. So these were the first reference, like postcards. I don't know why we just collected these. I
think it was super interesting to understand, yes, again, if you please, the architectural potentialities of it. And we were trying to highlight them, because like, for example, what is gonna be important for us, if you think about this interior, yes, on one hand is like the kind of performativity that it allows us. So we have an infrastructure, a series of metallic portals, and like we have a collective performance at the beginning because we can assemble the pavilion together with the people, and it's a whole ritual that starts from the market where we buy the chilies to the point where we transform them into a piece of architecture. And we have also the collective performance at the end, as I was saying before, the harvesting. But what is also interesting, and it's why we are trying to have the pavilion also reassembled after the festival somewhere else, is really understanding the chili as an architectural material. So as something that starts with a color, which is the green, and then it slowly dries, almost like affecting the image of the architecture, because affecting the way it's colored.
I mean, when we started making these images, what we were thinking was also to show them, for example, a 360 starting from left to right, the passing of time from green to red, completely dried out, or also the first step of putting the chili, and then while you turn it, there are people like just taking it home, adding some more, slowly changing, like an architecture that can be eaten.
Can be eaten and can be appropriated.
Yes.
Because like something that we also don't like sometimes about like these pavilions is that they are meant to be contemplative pieces. Like you go there, you look at them, they're beautiful, they're amazing, but you don't do nothing with them. And on one hand, of course, it's good, it's normal because they're meant as no program buildings. But like what we like is really the possibility of touching the architecture, of interacting with it. And in this sense, the chilies, the food, become a medium that connects people and the architecture that otherwise physically are disjoint. You picture this is a
not really
kind of
actually, but
I don't know. I mean, but I think it could be interesting. Like when we went there, like and they started building infrastructure.
But also like the
Sabrina was very
red,
happy
yeah, very
about it.
The colors. I mean, the fact that we were thinking first of all the red. So let's have all the structure in red. Let's have it with the chili changing colors. He literally started as an aesthetic, with an aesthetic point of view. And then I think it's going to be even more interesting to understand how the chilies are going to be attached to it with these zapatos, which were...
this one. So let me find them.
Which were the, what is it, the sponge?
These ones.
Yes.
Like those elements that are like a sort of a dry piece of fruit are gonna help us to create a sort of more volume, so that like you're gonna have the threads of chilies with more volume. So I mean, I think what is nice is that it's really about like cooking a piece of architecture, because we need to intervene firsthand and manipulate edible materials and understand how they interact, as you were saying, like with the steel frame, but also how they interact with the color palette. So in that sense, the act of making becomes an act of dealing with an edible piece, with an ingredient, with an actual gastronomic and culinary ingredient.
I think now we have two more, which are the latest, like finished yesterday. One is called marble salad, and the other one is called circolo, which means public club.
The marble salad.
Yes.
The marble salad is a project that we developed really a couple of weeks ago in Puglia, in the south of Italy, and like it's developed next to a masseria, which is this countryside mansion with this vernacular, peculiar type of construction, which is called the trulli. And like these, it is a 4x4 piece of flooring, basically casted in the vegetable garden.
So the idea is that in a couple of years, or even next year, it's going to be completely surrounded by the zucchini, the aubergine, what they planted, the tomatoes. And what we wanted to create, it was, first of all, a sort of collaboration with the marble sellers.
They're all debris. They're all leftovers.
All leftovers.
These pieces of marbles, they are not bespoke. We actually collected them.
Yes.
So in that sense, it's really a mixed salad, no? It's like a series of pieces, all of them coming with the wrong colors, with the wrong shape, and how we were really trying to put them together, and how the artist would have anticipated the nature. Because of course, then you need to come up with certain logic, but when you do a vegetable gardens, you also try to operate with the things that you have that you have available. And so, I mean, yes, I think that in this sense, physically, it has nothing to do with food. But as Sabrina was saying, when this thing is going to be surrounded by the colors of aubergines, zucchini, tomatoes, you're going to have really both symbolically,
a sense of island as well.
Yes, both symbolically and visually, a deep connection in between the artifact, the piece of architecture, and the nature surrounding it. The last one.
Do we have time for the last one? No.
Guys?
Yeah. I think like 5-10 minutes is fine. Then we can chat. Yeah.
It's gonna be even shorter. Like this one is something that we really finished a couple of days ago. And like if in the pavilion in Mexico, we can say that the food was used as a medium to connect people with the architecture, to allow people to touch the architecture. In here, maybe we can say that the architecture is something that deeply connects people with the food.
They are free. So 90% of this project is being just clean up this garden, this plot of land. And we wanted to basically have a convivium at the end, like a collective dinner with all the people in this workshop. So we want to create a sort of event, an happening. And we cutted 3 metal round. How big they were?
They were as big as a round table for 6 or 8 people is meant to be. So the biggest, they were 1.50 meters of diameter, and the smallest 1.20 meters.
And we literally wanted to just place them on the garden, on this on the soil, being able to eat all together. And at the beginning, we were thinking and overthinking perhaps too many instructions. So like, okay, the big one needs to be for the fish bits and pieces, the other one for the tomatoes. The tomatoes needs to be completely radial to this table, because otherwise you're not going to be able to reach or whatever. But then when the people actually sat down, then the performance happened by itself, because people started to mix the potatoes with the other plates that we prepared before. It was a sort of like they started cutting on it that we weren't expecting, or the
well, maybe we have like we have a couple of more interesting pictures. I mean, Soria, it's slow by here. I think like this one with the hands.
Yes.
Let me see. Yeah.
And also in this case, what it would have been, I think, nice to have is a sort of heat, like a weather condition that could have been applied a bit more. Because if these were hot and we could actually cook on top of it, I think it would have been like more interesting because he acts as a table, but he acts also as a pot, as a cutting board.
Yeah, the whole point was really deleting boundaries, erasing boundaries. So you don't have anymore a seat which is placed on the ground, but you sit directly on the ground. You don't have anymore a dish which is placed on top of the table. You actually eat on the table, as Sabrina was saying. And so the amount of things that you can do are kind of multiplied. And then you need to travel around. And I mean, and it's also about, again, how using certain edible things as architectural materials in order to depict the sort of aesthetic.
When they started mixing everything.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, you have like certain constraints. For example, we were cooking the potatoes that at the beginning were like too hot. And so like we couldn't place them directly on the table, so they had to be in pots.
But for example, now looking at also your example that you showed us, the rooms that you're creating, I imagine now like almost the sounds of the fish frying, or like the of the potato cooking. Like I think we got no. This is not the one, right?
It's actually
no. Here's just
well, it's about like directly applying a sort of sauce done with oil, parsley, and garlic directly on top of the table. But anyway, I mean, the name, going back to the name of the project, which is Circolo, like it represents our, let's say, attempt to create a connection in between like action and aesthetics. Because on one hand, Circolo, which means circle, of course depicts the way the project looks like, but also, as Sabrina was saying, Circolo is a place, in Italy, it's a very traditional place where people gather. And so the architecture of this thing is meant to enhance the togetherness that people can kind of experience when it comes to eat food. I think we can conclude with this.
Great, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Hope it was
very, yeah, that was very nice. I think I was thinking on how interesting it is to look at food as an expression of a local culture, and how, you know, we're starting to see with the 360 rooms how, you know, like things are easily misinterpreted. Like, because you're from a different context, then certain sounds mean nothing to you, or maybe mean something completely different. And then I think it's interesting, this is sort of a mistakes, this loss in translation. And I was thinking, like, in particular with this last project, how also eating is an extremely normative activity, but it's very specific to culture. So for us, eating on the ground and around the big table is something which is suddenly disrupting daily habits, but maybe for someone else in another continent is completely normal. So I think this is very interesting, like also in terms of inspiration, to think about how we reinterpret sounds and how we push this mistranslation maybe to create new meanings.
But also, I was thinking about it when it was more obvious for us when we were teaching in Bangkok, because being foreigners, we read the disappearance of street food sellers as a thing to be remembered, as a point of identity, and then we constructed this chariot and this mural that we're in the street, in a public club, in a public art gallery. But perhaps it's very tricky, and that's why it's important to don't do the things by yourself, but to invite people and to also to hear from other, from the people that live there, or from the tools that they use to eat, in order to understand better what it means for them. Or I was thinking when Anastasia was showing the cows, because of the sound of the barbecue. Like, for example, for me, like the sound of the barbecue reminds me of something else that not the cow. I don't know. So it's like also the choice of the selection that you take. Like perhaps we chose the tomato from Belmonte because they were the most typical one, but it would have been maybe more interesting to remake a dish in order to interact more with the inhabitants there, or I don't know.
Or maybe this clash is about people. It's about like providing to people a type of food or a sort of infrastructure that might be normal for certain ones and completely disruptive for other ones, and to understand how they react, and to understand how they interpret or they react, or they react to certain sounds or to certain gestures that other guests do. In that sense, like I totally agree with this. Like it's about inserting something alien that might come like as a designed object, that might come as an ingredient, or that might come as let's say a sort of a performative proposal to the audience.
It was interesting when Lele started by saying, "I'm sorry if this is offensive for Maltese people," because it is true that there's so many cultural hidden meanings in food, in the way we eat, in recipes, and it's almost like it's so strongly embedded in everyone's identity that it's very easy, as you say, to piss someone off because you do it wrong. So I think working with the chefs, with local, it's extremely important. But maybe also it's also about being open to hybridization and experiments. And I'm saying this, and Rebecca is laughing maybe because I'm very conservative when it comes to Italian food, extremely conservative. But maybe it's really about opening up and trying out something new.
That's exactly why I'm laughing, Jan.
He's an Italian, so I would say Jan is quite mild in terms of conservatism. Like I
think Jan's horizons broadened when he lived in Thailand and was actually really intrigued by the flavors and the cooking processes. And I think you also started evolving the way that you approach different ingredients. But there are some strict rules still.
In my opinion, it's interesting to understand how certain designed objects can really express the way we act when it comes to food. For example, even something banal as the fact of sitting on the ground or like eating around a circular table. The circular table in itself can somehow address and express a way of acting. For example, if you think about the lazy Susan, like the cliche Chinese table, but the fact that it has a rotating tray on top of it, like that element is really able to express his aim of being convivial, or like of eating collectively, of sharing the thing, like because it obliges you to put everything in the center and to actually share it. And it happens through a specific movement that the table can perform. So it's, for us as architects, it's a very interesting question, because like, how do you design a ritual? How do you make people perform in a certain way without giving them a script? So how can you make sure, or how maybe you hope that they react to things in the way you wanted, or maybe you hope that they react differently, unexpectedly, as Sabrina was saying. But what you can do is really designing the apparatus, the infrastructure, a series of things that can express a sort of script, or can address a sort of performance.
Can I ask a question on that, actually? Oh, sorry, someone else.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, because I was quite interested in your Mexican pavilion, or the pavilion in Mexico, and it as like architecture of public performance. And I was curious if, while you were designing it, the actual geometry of the pavilion minus the food, did you design that in a way that it would just allow for anything to happen, or did you envision kind of a time like facilitating how it would be eaten away, like, so at halfway there's chilies here because it's higher, maybe, or like, I was quite curious about that.
There were two things at the beginning, and completely opposite. No, not completely opposite, but like, I wanted a sort. This is what happened when you work in two. Like, one goes one way.
I don't know.
So I wanted like a sort of cathedral of chilies, and that's why at the end there is this hole, like at the top, that you can almost walk through. The smell of the chili is so strong that you almost start coughing throughout, and then you see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then you look up and there are all these chili surrounding yourself. For Lorenzo, I think it was more like the shape of the essiccatoio. How do you call it?
Well, not really the dryer, because it's right. When you have the dryer, usually you have a flat roof.
Yeah.
So that like all the things that you're drying, that you're hanging, they are reachable. I think here, I think like that maybe you want this thing, because like it was like totally a symbolic attempt, like since we wanted to highlight somehow the spirituality of like this sort of ritual or behind food. It's why we decided to give it this sort of shape. Also, in my opinion, like the fact of having like certain pieces of food that are easy to be reached, while for some others you kind of need to make an effort, it adds an interesting layer to the project, because it adds a sort of, what are you trying?
No, this one.
Yeah, but you want to have it bigger.
Yes.
So you want to have it like this.
Thank you. Yes.
And
no, but like, for example, now looking back, I think Lele's question was like, if I would like to amend a bit more the shape of it in order to have the hooks of the chilies be fitted in a different way.
But this is something quite aesthetic. Yes. While, for example, in here, the fact of in here, because you're right, in here you have like the highest point is almost 7 meters from the ground, so no way you reach it without a ladder. While in here, actually, you have it 2 meters and 20, so technically you can reach it by yourself. So, but like, yeah, it was also, yeah, mainly it was like to give it like the feeling of being a cathedral. But yeah, in that sense, also to like, they did, for example, the elements that were designed in a sort of performative way of to understand or to address these kind of issues were the table. Because, for example, we decided to have on this side the 3 openings. But you, from these openings, you can look inside, but you can't enter. And you have like this table connecting the interior and the exterior. So that means like the tables are the medium. So I can't come to you, but I can sit at your same table. And what we like, for example, is that in Spanish, table is translated as mesa, that comes from misa, which translates as mass, so as a celebration, as a procession. So like the table itself already embodies this, I mean, this kind of willingness.
I think it's a very cool project.
Thank you. Let's hope they build it. But no, it will happen. They constructed it, so in March, should be March 2021.
Thank you.
Alex, you're muted.
Okay. Should be able to hear me now. I was interested in the first project you shared, the edible archetypes, kind of just to understand what prompted that project. I'm also interested because my girlfriend's a professional baker, and so I never actually thought of a kind of, you know, a project that we could do together. But I was just interested to know if that was just a kind of exercise in exploring formal possibilities, or kind of how it was prompted.
I would say that mainly was that, like, it really, because like somehow we were designing certain pieces that in terms of visual languages, but also like structural solutions. Well, mainly visual languages were borrowing quite a lot from, let's say, the world of patisserie. So we were trying to understand what does it happen if we do this with a professional, and how can we learn from each other? How you can give us certain tips, and because, but I would say it was mainly that.
Why did we choose the domes again?
In that sense, we started from a very, we didn't say this, like, but we started from a typical Florentine cake, which is called zuccotto, that was used to be casted into the helmet of a soldier. So it would have had like this very typical dome-like shape, and like, and we were trying like also. So this is the most typical cake in Florence, and in Florence the most archetypical architecture is of course the Brunelleschi dome. So it was like, even in that sense, it was quite light as a as a comparison. But like, in then we can send you the link, like, because it might take otherwise a while to explain everything. But we were also categorizing the cakes according to different cities. So for each city, we would have taken a piece of architecture and the typical dish, and we would have elaborated it. And we were also categorizing it according to architectural, let's say, fields. So you would have had one which is concerned more in structural solutions. So you would have had one which is concerned more with the ornamental solution. So in that sense, it's about languages. It's about understanding, again, I'm not, as an architect, going to design a cake for you to be reproduced as a pastry chef, but we're gonna talk together about ideas, and we're gonna understand what to learn from each other.
I think these were the, I don't know if you want to show, but like Milan, Rome.
But are they seeing our?
No, they're not seeing.
They're not seeing our.
Yes.
So you should try to do the project with your girlfriend.
Yes.
Yeah, going to do a birthday cake or something. Yeah, yeah, it was beautiful work.
Thank you.
So would you say that glazing is a feasible architectural structural solution?
Absolutely.
Let's say that in that sense, it was about how to put together discrete elements through something that melts. And in that sense, maybe caramel looks much better than resin, and it has structural properties, while resin, well, it's a bit trickier.
I mean, we wanted to give also like a sort of range of projects with different scales. So the object, the architecture, the landscape. Yeah, let's see, maybe.
I think that's something. It's very interesting to think of recipe in the way. Wait, let me frame this. So, like when you make a recipe, you have a certain intuition of how taste could go together, and then there's another part which is about science, and that has to do with quantities and order and temperatures, and I think it's interesting to conceive of an architectural project like that. Like, how do you put together ingredients, but then how do you have to deal with constraints of structural properties in this case?
And also unpredictable.
Yeah.
Because like when you dish, conceiving the project as a recipe means being open also to modify a lot of things while you're doing it. As architects, we're used to maybe design something. Of course, you do a sort of a series of study models, but then at some point you fix the design and then you build that. While when you build a dish, so when you follow the recipe, you really learn by doing, and you really modify things because you adjust things, for example, by tasting something. And what does it happen if you apply that to a model prototype?
I think that most of the time, also in my 5th year, when I graduated, how I thought about the creative process was like in the order of the ingredients that I put on first. So what stays in the foreground, what stays in the background, in which order do I put things? And it helped me also to, like, it restricted me sometimes, because if you start from a material, then you're like, okay, now I'm stuck with these metal ribs. What can I construct around it? Or if you start from a sound, as in your case, then everything is more smoothly arranged again. So how you construct things and how you construct also the drawings. I mean, at the same time, there are two things. One is the 3D. Always, like, my mind is completely divided into 3D and 2D. So sometimes it's like a drawing. I constructed a drawing a certain way, and then the 3D is invisible for me. I'm like, I don't know how this looks like. So what I start doing is, like, I start with the 2D images, and I almost take snapshot of views of the 3D. I don't see the 3D as a whole, almost never. And what I do is instead the channeling like views. Instead, Lorenzo is very good with the 3D, and he's like, I know already how to shape this, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and I think he's always interested in how you create a project. Either you have a 2D more inspired mind, or you already see the object, the architecture, yeah.
I'm gonna call for last question, guys, because we're reaching again 90 minutes, and that's our self-imposed screen limit. So, any question?
Maybe I'm gonna just say this: the rooms that you showed at the moment remind me a lot. I don't know if you ever saw the Sotsas drawings or objects, how he constructed, or Nathalie Dupasquier that does the drawings, both architecture in different views and perspectives. There are a lot of really triggering images that came to my mind, even if these are very virtual. I don't know how to explain it. Like,
could you write those on the chat?
Yes. Yeah.
It would be nice to see. I also posted a link to Marki Vogelsang, who's a food designer. If anyone else is interested in that sort of field, I really recommend looking at her work as well. Really amazing.
Super Studio sofa, the sofa, this one.
Guys, what's next? What do you have anything in the pipeline or any thoughts on where to take this?
Us, yes. I don't know, I would like to try to mix our work a bit more with the making of props, actual props, and trying to understand, at the moment there are more happenings or they are more related to one event, one off, and then we leave. It's more like, I would like to try to understand how scaling up these things, these props, starting from the props and the theatrical point of view, like it can change meaning or it can act differently, placing back these things on site. I would like to experiment a bit more and spend more time on projects, because at the moment it's very quick. It's like a month thing, or I would like to try to understand how to rework on the same object, just changing scale, or the same space, just changing a hierarchy of the things.
In that sense, the Mexico thing, we were really waiting for it, because in order to understand if also certain things are going to work as we hope or as we imagine. Because it's a sort of scale that we really like, because we can conceive it as a piece of architecture, yet we really understand it as a theatrical scenery. So as something ephemeral. We don't mind at all that they're going to assemble and disassemble it in a week. We really wanna, we really like somehow keeping on doing these performative scenarios. But yes, the Sabrina is right. Like the scale of architecture, of course, like that kind of scale would be our aim. So hopefully there are like a few things cooking at that scale that we need to see if and when they're gonna happen. But
yeah, it's interesting because I think the performance of eating and cooking and just food in general is very clear in the work and the ideas that we talked about today. But it almost is interesting to then reflect on the larger scale, which is agriculture in general, and how we've almost lost our connection to what buildings mean in their origin. I think the buildings existed as a primary reason not to put roof over our head, but to store food. And so I think it's nice to maybe start getting back at a scale like that to question some of those roles and responsibilities of buildings.
Exactly. And also how really people can be involved. I wouldn't say with the construction of the building, but what we were trying to say with the Mexican thing, how you really have a sort of performative relationship with the architecture, not depending on the program, but what does it mean to appropriate, to touch? If I'm not constructing a pavilion or a piece, which kind of relationship, a physical relationship, can I have with it? So how can I participate? That can be not even like storing things inside it, but like in a very, let's say, if you want, even primitive manner. That kind of we have like a couple of other things that we're hoping to find a place for them, where really the people can have a physical relationship with the architecture. And in a way, I think it's something that happened also in the project that we were doing together last summer. That it has like a completely different scale. It was like a sort of inhabitable table that we were doing with Space Saloon in Hungary. And in that sense, it was inspired by certain gastronomic rituals, and it could have worked for actual culinary performances, but even for something else. But in my opinion, the primary concept behind that piece is was really the physical interaction between the body and the piece of architecture.
Always making architecture as if your mom was watching you, like in the sense that she needs to understand that. Because otherwise, many times I show projects and then she's like, nah, I don't get it. Nah. Yeah.
So you mean that she needs also to understand how to behave?
How to behave, yeah. She knows exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And if she get it, and then it's like.
No, but in my opinion, like pushing this to the next level is like, it's not about like explain. If you wanna, let's say, construct a performative piece of architecture, in that sense, it should be really intuitive. So I shouldn't give you a script in that sense. And this is what we were discussing before when it comes to the table. Like I shouldn't tell you how to use something. I should try to design the infrastructure and the apparatus of things so that like you try to guess how to use your body. Not conventionally, but how you try to guess how to relate with it.
Or it's something that visually you recognize. That's why we were thinking about the chilies as well. Something that any Mexican or whereas tourist went to the market and we translated a piece of the market into the public space of a square. Using it just to talk about, then you can build up your bullshit around, I mean, your story, your backstory around it, but it's like, start from a simple thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the comment about your mom needing to understand it is placing the role of architecture somewhere between, overly esoteric, which is, these forms have some philosophical meaning which don't make any sense to the public, and overly pragmatic, which is, it only serves a very direct purpose. And then you're in the middle, which is saying performative, where it's doing both, but in a way which is a bit more accessible, I think, to the public.
Exactly, but accessibility, and like when at the beginning John was talking about translation, also when it comes to symbolism, somehow doing things that are quite simple in order to be understood, that are like, I wouldn't say literal or straightforward, but that are direct. And then like, of course, you can refine them with material sophistication, but things that are understood quite easily, and so that they can lead to intuitive behaviors, to spontaneous behaviors.
I miss you guys.
We miss you too.
So I know what they're up to next. In September, Sabrina is turning 30, and she's throwing a huge party in Rome. So just so that you know, guys.
I mean, of course, like this thing with tomato was a test for like what's gonna happen in September. Bigger circles, more tomatoes.
Good.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. It was lovely. Thanks a lot. Any official communication, Danny?
We continue on Friday with sharing our results. So as Ashley was saying in the beginning, architects seem to work best on deadlines. So your deadline is Friday. So let's see you on Friday and share our environments.
We're curious.
Looking forward. Thanks to everyone who shared today.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, guys, have a good
one. Bye.
Bye.
Good evening. Ciao a tutti.